Hello students, today we are going to discuss about one of the most important part of any business, licensing. If you want to start a business and use intellectual property assets to gain and retain its competitive edge, you will want to familiarize yourself with licensing requirement. Licensing is the process in which when one party gives permission to use a legally registered and protected trademark or copyrighted item to another party. And this could be anything: a name, a thing, a likeness, a logo, a design, or a signature, a character as you can see in the picture, or even software. So we can say that licensing is a business arrangement for a fee. Okay, now today in today's lecture we will see what is licensing and what kind of process we should care of before we process for any licensing document. Okay, now let's start with the slide. Before we begin about licensing, let's learn something from a real example. I'm sure many of you have got a chance to visit and eat burgers with your family and friends in any one of the franchisee of McDonald's out of 38,000 in the world. Do you know that first McDonald's set up in 1940s at California by these two brothers which I have shown in the picture, Dick and Mac McDonald. From extremely modest beginnings, they hit a winning formula of selling a high quality product cheaply and quickly. But they could never have imagined the phenomenal growth that their company would enjoy in the future. It was not until a Ray Kroc, a high school dropout and Chicago based salesman with a flair of marketing, who became involved in the business and really started to grow. One day, he went to see McDonald and he was so impressed and he volunteered to franchise them for them. Ray Kroc imagined that the same successful McDonald's formula could be exploited throughout the United States and beyond. And the best way to achieve this was to offering franchisees. That means licensing. In 1965, McDonald's Corporation went public, and just within 3 years, in 1968, McDonald's opened its 1000th restaurant. So it's a very big success. So many of us we will think that McDonald brothers would become richer. But wait, Mac, McDonald died of heart failure and his brother left just over $1.8 million and spent his final days in a humble three-bedroom suburban home. Crook not only cheated brothers in the business but also out of their 0.5% royalty. Crook is still officially firm's founder. Could you name any corporation where an employee became the founder? Crook died in 1984 with his personal fortune was $500 million. dollars. Today, over 70% of McDonald's restaurants are run on the basis of licensing. So this case study helps us to understand the value and power of licensing for a successful management of any business. If the McDonald brothers have done the licensing agreement well, then this kind of thing will not happen with them. Okay, now let's move on to next slide. Okay, in the previous slide we've seen that McDonald's was an example of a brand licensing. We can say McDonald's the licensor who grants to the right to the McDonald's branded goods to someone who wishing to set up their own business, that is licensee, and in between them a license agreement which allows McDonald's to insist on manufacturing or operating methods and the quality of the product. So this is an arrangement that can suit both parties very well. So let's learn about these things. The word license simply means permission. One person grants permission to another to do something. So there are at least two essential parties: licensor, the party who owns the intellectual property and is agreeing to let it be used, and the licensee, the party who receives rights to use IP in exchange for payment. So why we should care about licensing? There are many things, but most important objectives from a company point of view are licensing, promote technology diffusion, and enhance technology innovation so that company can face existing technologies in a better way. Company can do R&D to enhance their technology. So what could be the business reason for the license? In today's world of rapid technology change, new technologies are the key to economic growth. Today, many products have very short life cycles and are readily replaced in the marketplace by new technology. If a company wants to survive, it needs to continually add new products to replace declining products. So the licensing is an important for part for these kind of objectives, which allows anyone can get the right to use, to sell, to make, or to have made. For the successful business licensing, one must define what legal rights both parties have and what must have you gain from this agreement to be worthwhile, and what is the best result and what outcome do you want to avoid, what are the specific routes that will make money for your our business. So these kind of questions you should focus. Licensing is a $1 billion retail market worldwide, but a license isn't a prescription for instant success. It gives you a borrowed interest of a name that is either unique or has some consumer acceptance, but it still takes good selling and marketing to succeed. A license is a tool, and when used well, it is extremely cost-effective marketing tool. Thus, before any licensing agreement, a negotiator must perform the difficult task of constantly accessing the way the key terms affect the business objective of the license. The goal is to stay as much as possible on the right side of the continuum. With respect to each key term, negotiator may decide to accept a compromise with respect to certain key term. That is, take a position that is not advantageous, but that is acceptable in the context of position taken on the other key terms. So the objective is to reach win-win situation. In general, a licensor looks for the strongest company in terms of finances, manufacturing, and marketing. IP valuation is the process of identifying and measuring financial benefit and risk from an asset. The value of IP depends on the context, like sell or license. What is the right price? What will be the royalty rate? And now let's move on to the license agreement. A license agreement is a partnership between an IP owner, that is licensor, and another who is authorized to use such rights, licensee, for a specified period of time under certain condition, and in return, licensor receive a royalty fee from the licensee. For example, 90% of $160 million a year in sales at Calvin Klein company comes from licensing the designer's name to makers of underwears, jeans, and perfume. And many of us think that it's a handsome amount for just sharing a name. But downside of the licensing is that you have to settle for a very smaller piece of the pie. Calvin Klein brand products, for example, generate around 5 billion US dollar in sales in a year. So out of $5 billion, you will get only 160 billion dollar, that is sales a year. The vast majority of which goes to licensees and retailers. On the other side of the coin, you could be the one with interest in licensing the high recognition name of another company. So too many, it might seem like the key to a gold mine. Putting a Nike logo, a Chota Beam character, or a Star Wars graphic. So this slide show the benefits and risk of the licensee and licensor. A company that owns the right in the patent, know-how, and other IP assets, but cannot or does not want to be involved in the manufacturing of products, could benefit from licensing out of such IP assets. In this slide, you can advantage and disadvantage of the licensing agreement from point of view both license and licensor. So, a primary advantage of a licensing agreement, the licensee does not have to bear the development risk associated with opening a foreign market. It is a very attractive for firms lacking the capital to develop operations overseas. Licensor with experience in the field of research and product development may find it more efficient to licensee out new products rather than take up production themselves. However, it does not give a firm tight control over manufacturing, marketing, and strategy that is required for a realizing experiencing experience curve and location economies. So, a license agreement can be disadvantageous when the product of the technology is not clear, defined, or is not complete. In such case, the licensor may be expected to continue development work at great expense to satisfy the licensee. Now, let's move on to the other side. Every licensing agreement is unique, and these agreements vary by the type, like copyright, trademark, patent, etc. So, what does the typical licensing agreement cover? In general, you will find these sections in most licensing agreement, like subject matter, definition, purpose, license, payment, restriction, beginning and the end of the agreement, non-disclosure agreement, non-compete agreement, like that. So we can all of these things we can be divided into the four clusters. Like some cluster one, subject matter, that is what is licensed, that, that means introduction of the licensed, and subject cluster 2, scope, what can you do with this license, what can you do, what kind of business you can do, what how can you achieve your goals from this. And third one is the financial, and what value is it. And fourth and the most important thing, upgrade and maintenance, that what will happen with the in the future, you have to do with the technology, what you have to do with the technologies, and what kind of improvement you can do with your patent. Okay, now we will discuss each of these things one by one. So this is cluster 1, subject matter of the agreement. Any kind of intellectual property such as patents, copyright, trademark, source code, design, logos, image, computer program, trade secrets can be licensed. So the person has to define very carefully what you are going to license. Does the licensor reserve a right to use for research or teaching purpose? Does licensor have any right over a further developed technology? And is that technology sufficient and accurately described in the details? Has due diligence done? Is the IP valid or enforceable? So these kind of some of the points you have to focus before you should start for any licensing. As you can see, these details one by one in the is table, patent number, the trademark, all of these points have been mentioned in the license, should be mentioned in the license agreement. Now let's move on to the next slide and see the example. In this example, we have shown that if someone wants to license a patent of a smart grid technologies, which are self-sufficient system like smart turbine is a wind and solar energy collector, as you can see in the picture also. So this kind of technology, suppose this is a one technology, if anyone want to patent this kind of technology, so he should prepare all of the this kind of table. Like patent one, he can find file a multiple patent, turbine for the turbine system, your integration system, or thin film, and he can do some claim many things, copyright issues, software systematics, trade secrets, know how to do these things. So this kind of all of the details he should mention in the license agreement. Now let's move on to the slide. So there are some common challenges in subject matter of the agreement. Stabilize ownership first. If you are selling or buying a license for a product, make sure that the ownership of that product is clearly stated in the agreement. Also make sure that no one else is using the asset, like as a trademark or for example, and get that trademark registered or filed for the registration for a copyright. You don't want to get into the licensing agreement and then find out someone else questions about ownership. Exclusive or non-exclusive. Exclusive for some countries and non-exclusive for others. So non-exclusive example, buying a software, Microsoft mobile apps. If you license a in technology, licensing technology that still requires a lot of development from a university, you may wish to negotiate for an exclusive license to justify the investment requirement. It has to be specified in the agreement. The second cluster is about the rights. Person have to pay attention to definitions. Make sure the product or process is described completely and clearly. So there's no misunderstanding about what is being licensed. The license itself is described with details about the limits of times, 1 year or many years, extent, US or worldwide, of license or assertion of exclusivity. The details about what the licensee can do with the license, like make products using it, sell it, sub-license it, distribute and export it, etc. Granting of rights. This is also a very important point. Defines what licensor is transferring to license. Licensor obligation set out how transfer is to take place in terms of assistance, support, training and cooperation, and license obligation. It will set about the financial requirement, guarantees of license, secrecy, cost, etc. So all these things you should do, you should care about before you process for any licensing document. Now let's move on to the next slide. We should also decide about the term, how long the agreement is to last, designated area and exclusivity, define manufacturing and marketing area of license, termination, describe rights of both licensor and licensee to terminate agreement. Licensor will normally will not guarantee the results of using rights granted. So the licensee may require to provide warranties, public liabilities, etc. And most important thing, beginning and end of the agreement. Spell out when the agreement is effective and when it ends. Describe the possibility of renegotiation and continuation of the agreement at the end of the term. Include circumstances when the agreement might end before the end of the term. What will happen to the ownership of the product at the end? Generally, it converts back to the owner. And both parties should also provide non-disclosure agreement. Both parties agree not to disclose any trade secrets. Licensor agrees not to allow anyone compete with the license in the territory and time period designated in the agreement. And one of the another important thing is that how all of the disputes will be settled. So these kind of some of the points he should we should take care during the process of license agreement. Now let's move on to the next slide. There are some common challenges also associated with the cluster 2. Like scope could be too broad or too vague or too restricted. Exclusivity granted without protections. Unclear about the sub-licensing and grant backs. Grant backs are generally used for used is just by the licensor. It is a provision in his licensing agreement under which the licensee is required to disclose and transfer all improvements made, included related know-how acquired in the licensing technology during the licensing period. Now let's move on to the next slide. Cluster 3, financial terms in the licensing agreement. After the licensor says yes for the licensing agreement, most of the companies will ask for a minimum guarantee of sales covering the life of the contract. It could be paid in advance or in installments and will charge royalties as well. Royalty are percentage of sale paid by the license to the owner of a property or designated agent. It will be usually based on the net wholesale selling price. Who gets paid and when? Does the ownership stay with the original owner during the license term? What happens if minimum sales are not met? Is there an advance on royalties? And one more thing, there should also be process of monitoring and quality assurance. There should be an initial test sample of product that must be approved before the products may be cleared. The periodic checks should be done on the product quality. This is the last cluster but not least, upgrades and maintenance. Person should also focus on the future developments and prospect of business. Joint improvements by the licensor and licensee, new products and patents, service and support. As we know, technology is always changing, but contracts are fixed in time. Now we are going to conclude the our presentation. Merits of the licensing intellectual property rights are convincing, and licensing should be a vital component of the business strategy of all companies. Still, it is important to consider the very preliminary question as to whether licensing is the right strategy to adopt or not. Even though there is much to be gained from licensing agreement by both parties involved, the risk with it cannot be neglected. A license agreement can be seen as an instrument for the distribution of risk between licensor and licensee. And the vital elements in the structure of the licensing agreement, we could divide into the floor custard, and we should focus on these points during the process of making preparing a license agreement. Subject matter, scope, financial of the agreement, and future upgradation and maintenance. Thank you. Question for thought. If you have any doubt about this presentation or topic, you can mail me at trshell82@gmail.com. And these are some of the questions which you have to mail me at my mail ID. And if you have any doubts, please contact me on WhatsApp.